The uprising in Egypt. Will it lead to higher prices at the gas pump? Our panelists on The Mix break down what it could mean for you. Plus, trying to breed a better biofuel.
So what you're looking at here is something you won't see anywhere else in the world.
An inside look at a lab engineering algae, the bugs that could make clean, green fuel. And the promise, jobs for Alaska and natural gas for the lower 48 states.
We began a nearly $40 billion natural gas pipeline to help lead America to energy independence.
But Sarah Palin's signature deal as governor faces big roadblocks.
This has been talked about since I was 12 years old.
Is a new Alaskan pipeline now just a pipe dream? This is Energy Now. A week of historic uprising in Egypt, and it could have a huge impact on the world's oil supply. Hello, I'm Susan McGinnis. Welcome to Energy Now, a weekly look at America's energy challenges and what we're doing about them. What is happening in Egypt may seem far away, but this crisis, how far it might spread and how the world reacts, could bring it close to home quickly. While Egypt exports only a small amount of oil, it's home to the Suez Canal, and about 3% of the world's oil traffic goes through the canal and a parallel pipeline. A shutdown means that oil must go around the tip of Africa to get to Europe and the U.S., adding more than 2 weeks to the trip, which could drive up the price of gasoline at our pumps. And if the unrest in Egypt inflames other Middle Eastern nations, what could that mean for the U.S.? Joining us now for this week's Mix are two energy market analysts, Flynn from PFG Best in Chicago and Peter Beutel from Cameron Hanover in Stamford, Connecticut. Thank you both. Good to see you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're talking about ripple effects here on U.S. shores. We're talking about the crisis spreading from here and also the disruption on shipping routes. Phil, how big a deal is this?
I think it can be a huge deal. It can be a huge positive, or it could turn out to be a huge negative. I mean, if you look what's happening in Egypt and throughout the region right now, this could be a Berlin Wall moment falling down, or, you know, it could turn out to be another Tiananmen Square in a turn. This is a very critical area that I think transcends your normal supply and demand fundamentals for oil. We're really talking about the stability of the region, possibly the future of democracy in North Africa, in the Middle East, and it could have a huge impact on oil prices and our oil future.
Peter, you're not as worried about this disruption and the impact. What do you think is the worst case for America?
Well, I do agree with what Phil said here, but the worst case scenario is that Yemen, Egypt, other countries, Sudan, potentially Algeria, maybe even on the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or the UAE, that some of these countries could follow. That's our worst case scenario. Egypt only produces about 685,000 barrels a day, most of which it uses itself. Only 3% goes through it, but right next door to it are millions of barrels, 20% of the world's daily oil supply, right there in the petroleum Gulf.
So, Phil, tell me, what is the worst case for U.S. oil and gas prices?
I mean, Peter hit it the nail on the head. I mean, if we get into some of these other countries like Saudi Arabia, if we see these uprising spread, I mean, we could be talking all-time highs on oil, $1.50 very easily. We could be talking over $4 a gallon for gasoline. You know, but this could go the other way as well. You know, we could see this create democracy in the region, more stability, and that could actually lower prices. So that, you know, it depends on how this plays out, and we really don't know at this point. We can talk about all the doomsday scenarios, and there's quite a lot of them, but you really have to watch this on a daily basis, and its impact on energy and the economy overall can be huge.
Phil, what is the worst case scenario for America if this spreads to other countries?
I think they're really reflecting this general uncertainty in the world, and it can turn out to be a wonderful thing. Maybe the economy is going to grow a little bit better. If we get more stability in the region, that's going to be a good thing. But then on the other hand, you know, if we get some governments that are not going to be as friendly to the U.S., if we get some governments in that area that are not as friendly to Israel, for example, that could flame up the region, and then of course prices could go through the roof.
Now, Peter, you say the U.S. is insane for for allowing this sort of recurring theme to happen every so often. And it brings us back to the major theme that we face a lot, we talk about a lot here on Energy Now, U.S. dependence on foreign oil.
We have been going through this every couple of years for my entire adult life now. I got interested in this back when we had the Arab oil embargo and then during the Iranian hostage crisis. And it basically has become a story that's repeated itself every few years through every administration during my life. And insanity is doing something and expecting different results. And this is what we're doing. We fail time and again to make energy a priority. We seem to have in Washington people so busy seeing blue or red that they can't see clear with the low-hanging fruit that they could both work together on building a better energy security for the United States.
Phil, is that realistic? I mean, how do you think we need to stop this recurring theme?
I agree with Peter, absolutely. You know, my take on this is that the U.S. does not need an energy policy. They need to get rid of their anti-energy policy, and that really is. I think the government so many times has stepped in the way of progress in this world. I know Peter's very excited about the Pickens plan and natural gas. That's probably one of the great hopes for U.S. energy. But, you know, really, I don't think the government needs to help it. I think we're moving in that direction anyway. What the government needs to do is get out of the way. And I think you're going to see a major shift in U.S. oil dependency over the coming years. We're seeing the beginning of it. I think we're going to see more. And you know, when Peter started in the business, the Arab oil embargo, we went through a period where we changed everything. Our oil demand didn't get to the same levels that we saw during that time period after we became more efficient, you know, for another 30 years. And I think we're getting into that same type of mode where the U.S. is going to be a lot more efficient. They're going to use a lot less energy, and we probably won't you know, see demand explode too much over the next few years, and we're going to probably be a lot smarter how we use it.
Peter, final word. What's the next U.S. move here?
Well, I agree. We need to open up a lot of the things that the government is stopping. I personally want to see more drilling. I do want to see more nuclear. The beautiful thing right now about the price of oil is it's high enough so we can afford to have an environmentalist following every single roughneck around saying, oops, you dropped that, pick up that drop, don't do that. There's enough room to get environmentalists involved at every step and still produce oil. We've got the very exciting shale oil prospect that we've seen what it's done with shale gas, ethanol. I mean, the list goes on. I just want to see us start working together, left and right, and red and blue, and starting to build what we can here that will give us a stronger energy security, because these problems only get worse every time they recur. So we need to do something, and we need to do it fast, I think.
All right, Peter Beutel with Cameron Hanover and Phil Flynn with PFG Best. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, America's dependence on foreign oil is nothing new. Politicians have been sounding the alarm to diversify our energy sources for decades, but it wasn't always that way. Check out this Energy Then clip from a 1951 American Petroleum Institute movie called Man on the Land.
The demand for oil products keeps increasing. There are always scoffers. You're heading for trouble. Pretty soon there won't be any oil left. Wrong again. New techniques are even bringing old wells back to life. New fields are being opened up all over the world. New drilling methods to tap oil pools miles underground. Better refining. New techniques to conserve every drop of oil.
60 years later, and our thirst for oil keeps growing. The Energy Information Administration estimates that world oil consumption will grow by an annual average of 1.5 million barrels per day through 2012. Well, coming up, making a better biofuel through bioengineering. Scientists are getting more oil out of algae by doing what nature doesn't, the possibilities of engineered algae. And later, Alaska is rich with natural gas, but how do you get it to the rest of America? At one time, a huge proposed pipeline held promise, but now it could all be just a pipe dream.
I'm Mark Zupan, part of the U.S. Paralympic rugby team. In my game, movement is everything. I get frustrated when my move is blocked, especially when that guy has no right to be there, even just for a minute. I love a challenge, but I don't like to play this game every day.
A message from the United Spinal Association.
Now let's get you plugged in to some of the top energy news. Oil and natural gas drilling companies are being accused of illegally injecting millions of gallons of diesel fuel into the ground. Investigators for the House Energy and Commerce Committee say a dozen companies in 19 states mixed significant amounts of diesel into their hydraulic fracturing fluids between 2005 and 2009. Democratic Congressman Henry Waxman says none of the companies had permits required to protect drinking water. In a letter to the Environmental Protection Agency, he said this appears to be a violation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The letter also said they had not been able to determine whether the diesel injections threatened groundwater. Industry officials say the EPA has no process to issue those permits and deny what they're doing is illegal. The EPA is conducting a new study on fracking. President Obama says businesses can save $40 billion a year in energy costs by making their buildings 20% more energy efficient. At Penn State University, he announced a 5-point plan to spur efficiency retrofits of commercial buildings. The plan includes tax breaks, easier loans to pay for upgrades, and a competitive grant program called Race to Green. The president also toured a Penn State lab where engineers are devising cheaper ways to make energy-saving retrofits. And 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015. That's another of the president's clean energy goals. But according to a report for the auto industry, automakers won't even be making that many cars because there won't be enough consumer demand. The report from Indiana University says the public apparently worries that electric vehicles cost more, have short driving ranges, long recharging times, and not enough recharging options. Well, biofuels could become an energy blockbuster, a fuel source that could help the U.S. get off of foreign oil. But what may be the most promising biofuel research sounds like something out of a horror movie, getting oil from genetically altered algae. Energy Now Chief Correspondent Tyler Suiters explains in this Energy Next.
Deep in laboratories across the country, something is growing. Something that isn't natural. Something that's
alive. It's alive. It's alive.
But this isn't Transylvania. It's not even Pennsylvania. It's California, home of the biotech company Solazyme. Something is growing in this lab. Algae that can produce oil. Unnatural amounts of oil. Algae genetically engineered by scientists. And that oil, it can eventually go into your gas tank as biofuel. And with enough federal help, it could wind up in all of our gas tanks.
With more research and incentives, we can break our dependence on oil with biofuels.
How? According to the industry, within 10 years, a huge portion of the gasoline we use could be replaced by biofuels, algae included.
It would be reasonable to assume that close to 90%, 80 to 90% could be replaced by renewables.
Each one of these is engineered by your team, right? This isn't a naturally growing algae.
What we do is we actually start with wild strains, and then we, in cases where that strain can do two things. One, our first filter is to look at the oil that it can produce.
And Solazyme has looked at roughly 10,000 strains of algae so far. The second filter, feedstock, what that algae likes to eat.
So can you look at waste streams, like a very dirty molasses that's coming out of a sugarcane manufacturer, like glycerin that is coming out of a biodiesel manufacturer. So
you can feed the algae something no one else wants. Brent Erickson represents the biotech industry.
As you see the bubbles coming up through this mixture.
Carbon dioxide.
It's carbon dioxide. So it eats carbon dioxide, so it helps us with climate change.
And that dual use, capturing our carbon pollution, creating a domestic fuel, that's got the government's eye.
This is a very exciting period.
Joyce Yang is with the Department of Energy, an agency showering attention and money on engineered algae research.
There's a lot of new insights that's come along since we first started looking at it in the 70s. And I think it's been a real renaissance, certainly.
Helping rev up that renaissance, for Solazyme, the nearly $22 million in stimulus funding from the Department of Energy, funding to build a biorefinery for algae fuel.
We do need some help from the government because it's very costly to scale this up into very large production facilities.
Federal funding, private investment, scalable technology. Sure, the competition's hot in Silicon Valley.
But the competition extends well outside of California. This algae research is taking place in Langfang, China, about an hour's drive south of Beijing. The funding source, a major Chinese energy player, ENN, 25,000 employees strong, a company that is very eager to turn algae into a cash crop.
In part because China, not the U.S., now has the world's biggest thirst for energy.
The United States has traditionally been #1 in biotechnology, and we need to work hard to preserve that lead, but the Chinese are definitely breathing down our necks.
The algae in these tubes at the ENN plant, its food source is carbon dioxide from a coal plant. ENN is putting emissions from China's most polluting source of electricity, coal, inside this algae and getting oil out of it. The company says this technology will be at commercial scale in about 2 years' time.
What is China doing better? What is this private sector doing to generate such strong advances?
I'm not sure they're doing anything better. They just have a very significant focus on this because of the number of people that they have.
The market
and
size.
We need to make sure we keep our focus.
Algae might seem as green as it gets, but there are concerns about engineered algae. What if it, well, escapes into the wild? What if that algae, genetically modified to devour CO2 and produce huge amounts of oil? What if it overwhelmed natural algae? A 2009 presentation at a biomass conference posed that question. The answer? No one is certain.
I think certainly algae is one of the ways that could be environmentally benign and result in a product that can have other uses as well.
So what you're looking at here is something you won't see anywhere else in the world.
Containers of algae fuel made by Solazyme, some of it bound for the military.
You're looking over here at also these are additional barrels of oil, and up on the top shelf you see some algal distillate. Basically that's Navy diesel fuel.
Some of the 20,000 gallons of algae diesel fuel Solazyme delivered to the Navy last year. And this year, the Pentagon wants more than 7 times that amount from the company.
It seems like looking at this, a barrel is tangible proof that you've gone from growing algae in the lab to cranking out product and proof of everything in between. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And even more important, we are delivering tanker trucks full.
In the future, we're going to find new strains, and then we're also going to breed our own new strains to make them more efficient and produce multiple products as well.
Now, through this door is an entire division of Solazyme that came about basically by accident. You see, scientists were sifting through the 10,000 strains of algae they had on hand and found one that produced a different kind of oil. And here it is, almost like olive oil. Well, that discovery led to an entire array of algae-based food products. Honey mustard sauce, cookies, even vanilla milk. Pretty good. Already, some of these products are showing up in stores. This one is at Whole Foods. So, in case the whole algae to fuel process doesn't work out so well, Solazyme has a pretty good backup plan in place.
But if the algae industry's vision for a domestically grown oil supply does come to life, maybe the future of fuel won't be as scary as we think. In South San Francisco, California, Tyler Suiters, Energy Now.
Well, Solazyme isn't the only algae to fuel company to get government funding. San Diego's Sapphire Energy received more than $100 million, including stimulus money, to build an algae biorefinery of its own. One of Sapphire's key investors is Bill Gates. But on the flip side, Shell is selling its stake in algae biofuel developer Solana because it feels it doesn't have enough commercial viability. Other oil companies like ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, and Valero are continuing to collaborate on algae biofuel projects. Well, coming up, does Alaska hold the answer to U.S. oil dependence?
That pipeline, when the last section is laid and its valves are open, will lead America one step farther away from dependence on dangerous foreign powers that do not have our interests at heart.
What stands in the way? Energy Now heads to the last frontier to find out. With unrest and uncertainty in Egypt and its possible impact on gas prices in the U.S., there are renewed calls for getting us off foreign oil. Alaska is the home to vast oil and gas resources that could help the U.S. cut its oil imports. Plans have been in the works for decades in Alaska to lay a giant pipeline to move natural gas to the lower 48 states. But is it only a pipe dream? Does anybody want what the state is trying to sell? Energy Now's Dan Goldstein traveled to Alaska to find out in this Energy Now Spotlight.
It was summer 2008. Sarah Palin's moment on the big stage, and her natural gas pipeline plan was front and center.
That pipeline, when the last section is laid and its valves are open, will lead America one step farther away from dependence on dangerous foreign powers that do not have our interests at heart.
And on that front, Sarah Palin was absolutely right. The gas pipeline could supply nearly 10% of U.S. daily natural gas demand for the next 300 years.
We have 35 trillion cubic feet of known and measurable gas reserves on the North Slope.
Mary Ann Pease is an energy consultant who worked on the pipeline.
This is a mega project that could deliver clean energy not only for North America, but also worldwide.
And because of Alaska's declining oil production, it's needed now more than ever. The Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline, or TAPS as it's known, it runs through the state, carried 2 million barrels a day 20 years ago. Now it carries just 600,000. In fact, the oil pipeline, which was shut down for 4 days in January after a leak, could run dry by 2018. Charisse Millay is the head of the Alaska House Energy Committee.
Our pipeline is 2/3 empty, which means, to me, at some point in time, that valve is going to have to be turned off because it's not economical and it's not safe.
The natural gas pipeline could also be a 1,700-mile-long lifeline for every Alaskan resident. They get royalty checks from oil and gas companies in the state. In fact, the plans, though, have been in the political pipeline for the past 40 years. President Richard Nixon touted it in 1973, along with the oil pipeline.
And I'm asking the Congress to act quickly on several proposals. One would remove government regulations which now discourage the growth of our domestic natural gas industry.
Gas pipeline was proposed almost immediately. In fact, even before the oil pipeline, construction started. Back and forth.
Dermot Cole covered the construction of the oil pipeline for the Fairbanks newspaper in the 1970s. That pipeline took more than 3 years to build, but Cole says the gas pipeline could be built even faster.
There's so much of the infrastructure is already in place in Alaska. The roads are in place, the oil field facilities and gas field facilities are in place.
Okay, so why hasn't the gas pipeline been built?
Various economic and political roadblocks have come up over these decades and prevented it from happening.
But those roadblocks appeared to lift in 2006 when then-Governor Frank Murkowski inked a deal with BP, ConocoPhillips, and ExxonMobil to build the gas pipeline. But state lawmakers rejected the deal as a giveaway because Alaska couldn't raise taxes on the companies involved for 50 years.
Okay, here we go.
Enter Sarah Palin. Back then, she was head of Alaska's powerful Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. She challenged Murkowski for his job and won. as Governor Palin got the legislature to adopt her gas line plan instead, with open bidding and $500 million in tax credits as a lure. Pipeline giant TransCanada and ExxonMobil won the bid. BP and ConocoPhillips lost, but went ahead with plans for a rival pipeline called Denali. Still, most Alaskans don't care which line gets built. They just want the jobs that come with it.
Well, I can tell you in the 70s when TAPS was being built, everybody that wanted a job had a job in Alaska. And I foresee the model that TAPS had going to the gas pipeline, and anybody in Alaska that wants a job is going to have a job.
And those natural gas jobs appeared to be just around the corner when the economic crash of 2008 that sent natural gas prices plunging. Discoveries of giant shale formations in the lower 48 states didn't help either, as they left the United States with more natural gas than ever predicted.
That's totally changed the outlook for pricing of gas in the United States.
Energy analysts like Elliot Guse say the shale finds mean it may not be economical to build either pipeline now.
And it makes the pipeline that might have looked like a great idea 2 or 3 years ago with gas in the teens look like a very just uneconomic at current prices.
But the state of Alaska still remains optimistic. Kevin Banks is with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources.
Where we are right now is that we believe that the project can move forward with the kinds of gas price projections that we're looking at.
But for now, moose, instead of natural gas, move along the proposed pipeline route. But Bud Fackrell, who heads the Denali Group, says the economic downturn is just a short-term setback.
You can see all kinds of forecasts. In the end, I believe fundamentally Alaska natural gas makes sense moving into the lower 48 market.
But some in Alaska are losing patience. Lawmakers introduced legislation to abandon the state's efforts to build the natural gas pipeline. And in December, the Energy Information Administration, that's the government's own energy forecaster, said Alaska's natural gas pipeline wouldn't be profitable for 25 years and would be uneconomical to proceed. That could mean Sarah Palin's dream from 2008 could be even further away than ever before. In Anchorage, Alaska, Dan Goldstein, Energy Now.
And if the pipeline isn't built, what might Alaska do with all that natural gas? One option being discussed, sending it to Asia, where the demand for natural gas is surging. But to do that, first they need to build a plant to liquefy the gas so it can travel on a tanker. And that could cost almost as much as the pipeline itself, at least $36 billion. Well, this year's Super Bowl will be more than an athletic and partying extravaganza. It will also be super green. And that's what's in this week's Energy Now Hot Zone. As tens of thousands converge on Cowboy Stadium in Dallas for the big game, think of the carbon cleat print. Heating, lights, cameras. They'll use enough electricity to power 1,500 homes for a year. So this year, the NFL is buying wind power offsets for every megawatt used at the Super Bowl facilities for the entire month leading up to the game and game day itself. The NFL will score the offsets from Sweetwater Wind Farm in Sweetwater, Texas, more than 200 miles or 352,000 football fields away. Well, that's it for this week's show. Check us out online at energynow.com. Let us know what you think of our stories or if you have energy questions for any of our upcoming next guests. Upload your video questions or remarks to our YouTube channel, Energy Now News. Give us your name and where you're from, and keep the remarks short, less than 30 seconds. Also, you can friend us on Facebook, search Energy Now News, join our discussion pages, and you can follow us on Twitter at Energy Now News. We'll see you next week.